Welcome to Country acknowledges our First Peoples, the custodians who continue their stewardship across our vast lands. We invite you to be our guests and make a true connection.
Ya welcome ya, Iorokan.
Indigenous.
Yeah!
Yapalina.
Bro.
Nanga.
Kapmon.
Yandane Godada Goda.
Welcome to Bushfires country, guys. You're now in Kuyu Beach or Kuyu. Come on down.
Womanjika.
Chingiwala.
Welcome, guys. My name's Dustin Maloney.
Full call to welcome yous.
Natwa, welcome.
Yalada Jangura. Garida. Kubri Warabubu. Kuyu.
Koji Eagle.
Natamwa, woman indie.
Hi, I'm Rhoda Roberts, a proud Widgeable woman and a member of the Welcome to Country Board. It is my pleasure to be here today to announce this amazing series of events. The journey begins with Welcome to Country. You can imagine the unexpected. You know, taking a First Nations travel experience is much more than simply just taking a photograph of our ancient landscape. It is about the depth of listening, witnessing the diversity of our cultures, the mystery of rituals, the food, the language, the story and the song. Up until the 8th of December, we're featuring a series of free online events, and we'll give you a sneak preview of 17 life-changing experiences. These are just a taste of what we have on offer. And so now I'm going to hand you over to your next cultural experience with some amazing guides from across the country. Enjoy. Well, thank you so much for joining us for another talk with our Welcome to Country. Yes, Indigenous tourism across the country. Well, our special guest is Victor Steffensen. He's from Gulf Country up there in North Queensland. And thank you so much, Victor, for joining us and having this little yarn with us about all matters of things, but particularly country. So to start, I'd love to ask you, I mentioned you're from Gulf Country. Now, I will have a try at saying what your mob is, but I'll probably get it wrong. But it is Tagalaka peoples.
Yeah, that's right.
How do you say it?
Tagalaka.
Oh, pretty close then.
Tagalaka, yeah. And
For our listeners, can you just describe what that Gulf Country is like for you?
well, for that country up there was where my grandmother and my mother grew up and left at a early time. So a lot of our elders, even my mother's cousins and my grandmother's brothers and sisters were all removed from country. So that was back in 1940s, 30s, all that sort of time, and 20s, at the time when the gold mines were in that area. So we fortunately didn't get to grow up on country the way that we wanted to. We ended up, they ended up moving to a little town called Mariba and
Lovely.
living there. And then we grew up in a town called Kuranda, my hometown here. From there, connecting back to country has been a life sort of thing, you know, and just meeting relations and finding uncles and aunties again, and people in your family and who should be in your life. And so that's all fulfilled. And even better now that my mother and her brother, my uncle, started to attend the Tagalaka meetings and regathering and meeting all the families and people and countrymen. And I think that's a really great thing and really important for everyone, that is Aboriginal in Australia, to find their roots and their connection to land and country and people. And so that's really fantastic, But I've been reviving knowledge and, looking for answers since I was young and working with neighbouring clan groups and elders So yeah.
It is, that sense of belonging is so important. And I think, you know, when people do travel across the country, they get to hear those stories, you know, very much truth-telling about the history and what happened, but also about how it doesn't matter where we go. There is something intrinsic that links us to that country of our birthright. And I really admire you. You talk about, you know, going along that journey, but the reclamation work that you've done, particularly with values and knowledge and ecology, is what everyone knows you as. And I'd like to go back and talk to you. I mean, you're a writer, but you're also a musician. So when did you start playing music?
I started playing
Are
music.
you a good musician?
Well, I've been playing music since I was only in my teens. And the way we started playing music was in little Kuranda town. Everyone could play guitar. And, you know, all Aboriginal people were musicians in Kuranda town. And we had great mentors with music when we were young, with the Mantaka band, with Willie Brim, and which now is Zenith and Astro.
I was going to say Zenith, bit of reggae. If you haven't heard of this band, you should go out. You can get their music online, but it has that a very North Queensland rainforesty feel, but also mixed with reggae, bit of language, and quite extraordinary. It is really that sense of North Queensland Aboriginal music.
That's how we grew up, listening to all that stuff with mentors in Kuranda. And, you know, there were some great bands that happened around there. But the main thing is that we were always playing guitar down the river. We were always camping down the river, taking the guitars with us, taking the fishing lines, and sitting around the fire, you know, with large groups and just playing guitars and singing all night, all that Charlie Pride songs and all those old country songs.
Was it Charlie Pride?
And
a bit of country. Do you write music as well?
Was that, sorry?
Do you write music as well?
I don't read music and don't write, but I do write. Yeah, I do have a lot of songs and write my own lyrics. And I'm actually going to record this week in the studio, and I'm going to put a song, record a song, and just share that with people. But at the end of the day, I do a lot of music with the film work that I do as well. So recording music for lots of films, and I love doing that sort of work as well. And it just keeps me sane, you know, in terms of playing music on a Friday night at home here and getting friends over or going to other people's places to play music together. And, you know, and my partner's a musician, and it's just, music's in my life and always will be. Yeah.
Music is one of the great levelers, I think, but also it's one of the great healers. And I think, you know, during 2020, we've seen how musicians have adapted. But we all need that music. It doesn't matter where we are, whether we're isolating or we're recovering from fires. Everybody still needs that music as a healing. And I think you perhaps, apart from being a filmmaker, a writer, a musician, I would say that you're a bit of a healer and definitely a knowledge keeper. And I'd really love to talk about, I mean, a lot of Australians would have heard about you, Victor, although you've been doing this forever. But of course, there was a lot more attention this year and last year after the fires that people started to look and question hazard burn-offs and all manner of things. And we started to hear your discussions about your perspective of fire. So would love to ask you, when did you start to look at that complexity? How old were you when you started to look at the land and the complexity of our own knowledge systems, and whether it was mosaic burning or fire stick burning, but indeed cool burn-offs?
I think I would have been, you know, it all started just with the interest of Indigenous knowledge, you know, and that is everything. You know, I wanted to learn the plants, the animals. I wanted to learn, you know, how to survive off the bush and be clever like the old people. And that's something that I always searched for. But it wasn't until I was about 18, turning 19, that I met up with Dr. Tom George and George Musgrave, my mentors, who are now passed now. But, you know, and many other elders around that time that I connected with, that learning about country. And it was when we started to really look at the aspirations of the old people that fire started to come around into my life. I mean, when we look at our elders, their aspirations are to get out on country and to start looking after the land, and more importantly, pass that knowledge on to younger generations and get them out onto the country. And that's what, all the elders want to see, because the land is medicinal and it's important for ongoing survival of culture and well-being. And just to have the land in general healthy for the future generations, So, it was doing all that sort of work with the elders, and fire came into the scene because the land was really unbalanced and unhealthy, and the elders were always complaining that they couldn't find certain foods and berries and certain places on country when it was overgrown or rubbish everywhere. So fire kept on being mentioned on the scene, and they were experts on fire. And I never met anyone till this day that was as knowledgeable as those old people on fire. And so we started to try and implement that, and one thing led to the next, and after the next, and people started to find out what we were doing, and we started to help people and other communities, and that soon escalated to people then Southern Australia coming north and coming to workshops and coming to visit us up in the north, and then it escalated to myself going down south and helping them on their own country, and then it moved to communities mentoring other communities and building skills in other places and other communities doing the work, and just building that momentum that should have been there, and which is really the kinship system on a management level, on a landscape where Indigenous communities support each other and look after their land, and that is the foundation of Aboriginal culture, and that's so important that it exists, because we can't go forward without it, in terms of management and, well-being for culture and people.
Absolutely. And I think when you talk about those wonderful old men, such wisdom men, and I think during that generation, there were many around the country looking at the old ways and how the old people really worked by seasonal. The behaviours were really determined by what was happening in the seasons. And there was this real almost fear, I guess, and a worry about how vital it was that if they did pass away, this knowledge would be gone forever. So I suppose you've, in a way, become the inner voice they had. You're now become very much a spokesman on that knowledge, on those systems. And I guess we often think about the situations that's occurred, since the arrival and colonisation of the country. And often it can sound like doom and gloom. But one of the things I noted in your book, but also, Victor, you often talk about it, is that complexity. And when you understand what the different types of burn-off were, it sort of rests your mind a bit easy, even though there is a lot to do. Can you just take us through the different types of, particularly how a lot of mobs across the country would do those cool burns? What is a cool burn?
Well, the cool burn is basically the nature of fire when it's managed the right way. And they're just two simple words, cool burn. And that doesn't sum up the complexity of the knowledge itself, and all the different land types and country types, and all the different way that fire is also applied to heal landscapes that is unbalanced. And there's a whole complexity of knowledge there that is around that, and it's all based on the practical, and it's all based on so many values around foods, medicines. And what people are going to understand is that it's just not burning country and just letting the match go and then, and just burn the land. It's, in the old times, people burned their land for food, and they did it carefully because they didn't want their land destroyed from wildfires, and they didn't want to burn hot to create less food for themselves. They burnt in so many different ways and fashions, just like permaculture, and in ways that resets country and to allow country to have a rest and to rejuvenate from overhunting or overgathering in places, and so it was all about balance, and also it was all about what country needs, because it's evolved over thousands of years with fire, and people have been a part of that. And what Aboriginal people have done over thousands of years is has found a responsibility now that the land depends on, and depends on people to do. And even the animals know these fire regimes, because they behave in certain ways that tell us that they know this knowledge by going to the fire and nesting certain places that won't burn early in the year. And
Can you give us an example?
Gestures like that. Or like when we're burning, you can see kookaburras come in for feeds, and you can see that animals like insects climbing the trees to escape the flames, because they know they're safe in the trees because the flame's always low. And you get animals that they just hop to the next ecosystem and they don't have to flee. And guanas and other animals I see that are just sitting around the fire, not even panicking, and they know that fire, and they know all the indicators to the right fire. And when we get the wrong fire, they flee. And so understanding that, there's a real connection of people and land, and all of the plants have evolved around fire to create the right grasses and the right soils. And people have been a part of that evolution. And Aboriginal people are a part of that. And maintaining that is crucial, because the land depends on that. And when people are taken out of the landscape, that's when we get the problems that we see, because we're no longer playing our role. And most importantly, in a real simple term, we're no longer putting love into the landscape.
That's a lovely way of putting it. And I think in your book, Fire Country, one of the key elements, I guess, and I would love to walk behind your eyes, because I think as you walk through country, you would be looking at it and actually reading country, looking at where the new shoots are, how the river tidal system's working, what the bark is falling off the trees, and various other indicators of that seasonal behaviour. How do you get that message across in a way to getting Australians to understand the reading of country?
Well, firstly, what my mentors did for me was they that knowledge survived through them, through their time and their ways of growing up, and then they passed it on to survive through myself and other family members and Laura, part of their families, and then that was passed on to help with other communities. And it's all about the survival of that knowledge, and the way that is done is through the practical. And so for me, it was never been about a spokesman or being someone who talks, but someone who can keep that same practice of what those elders gave me to keep going, and that is to be practical and pass that knowledge on in a way that people can see for themselves and experience it on their own land as well as in other areas. So everything is based on being on country, and everything is based on learning on country, and doing the fire and lighting the fire and showing people how it all works. And it really is about that experience and giving people that experience. And that is what the elders done for me, and that's what elders have done for thousands of years, is pass on that knowledge through Indigenous teaching methodologies. And that is done through the practical and by doing it, which is totally opposite to Western research methods where they study it before they apply it. So for me, it's always been important to maintain that right way of teaching, which is based on the Indigenous way of teaching. And that is to take people out on country and to experience it firsthand. And you can't talk about country without being on country. And you can't show them the indicators without them being there. And that's what, that's what's been missing all along. Conversations and meetings about landscapes in meeting rooms and behind closed doors, and managing country from an office and looking at maps. You can't do that. And the land is the boss, and the land has to tell us what to do. And like you said
4
before, we're
years.
talking about seasons and reading all those seasons. And we can't make a decision if we're not looking at the land and the land telling us what is the right decision and when precisely to apply that decision. And that's the way that we teach, and that's the way it should always be taught. And that's why it's been doing so well and getting so many young people activated in many parts around the country to also take the same role that I'm playing in leading this into the future and being the mentors and practitioners in our own country.
Mother Earth certainly is a great boss. I live in northern New South Wales, and we actually had the fires come through in November, December. And it was quite devastating for many of the farmers in our region. But walking through, I'd never seen so much ash. It was really quite thick. We've had bushfires before, and we often hear our local councils talk about these hazard burn-offs. And I'd love you to explain that a little bit. But for me, on a personal level, we lost a few things, but nothing major, and we still had our lives. And I saw you during that period of those bushfires talking a lot on the media. And I can't imagine what you were carrying culturally, but also being in those areas where you see devastation, and it just affects you in a way that I don't know. How do you cope with all that? And can you tell us a little bit about that period where all the fires hit and you were literally everywhere talking about how we could do better with this?
Yeah, I mean, you don't ask for things like that, it just happens, and it's really weird how things like that happen. And, you throw your life at this, and you do this work for so long in your whole life, and then all of a sudden there's this explosion around, the common sense around fire, Indigenous fire, and managing land, and you're in the middle of it. And all I can really say is that someone's got to do it, and someone's got to say something, and someone has to represent in some way. And I don't just want that to be myself, and I want that to be thousands of faces, and I want that to be all the communities talking up. And we start to see that. We start to see not just myself on the media, but many other communities as well. And it's really great to see. And that's what we need. We need to be working together, and we need to be standing strong on this. And, and I'm happy to support those early stages and to be a part of that. And I'm really proud of that. And I'm also really proud the elders are part of that as well, and all my mentors being a part of that. Even though they're not here anymore, they are here, and they're a part of the whole process, and it wouldn't be happening without them. And,
so who gives you your support, Victor?
What was that, sorry?
Who gives you support? Like, how do you cope with it all? You're only human.
The country. It's the land is my biggest ally. And the other part of that is community, people, like it's the communities that invite me to go and help them. And it's the land that has all the safety and the cultural knowledge and cultural safety. And it's the land that holds all the truth. And there's no one that can go past the truth that comes from our landscapes. And when I talk about, like, when I first started going south and other parts around in other communities in different places, I went to the old people and I asked them, when they were still with me, and I said, they asked me to go south and go to another community or do this and that and share knowledge, and I'm frightened. I'm scared what people are going to say, or I don't know what to do. And then the old people just went, just stick to the country and stick to the land and stick to the people, and everything will be all right. And that's what I did, and they were right, And now that I've carried on that work and continue to carry on that work, it is my greatest allies, country and community. And people don't understand really how powerful that is, and just how important it is to promote change into the future, and to change the mindsets of the government, to change the mindsets of the broader community, it's all done through landscapes. And when we look at like old farmers, 80-year-old farmers that are third generation, go, oh, you know, don't tell me about the land. I'm third generation, you know. And then, you know, spend an hour with them on country, and then it just turns their world upside down. And they realize that they don't know the country. And so a lot of the hidden agendas and a lot of the false mindsets in this country are no match to the truth of the landscapes. And that is where Aboriginal culture sits. And that's what needs to be shared, you know.
If you've just joined us, you're listening to Victor Steffensen, one of our guests on our live events here for welcometocountry.com, all about finding that place on country, destinations to visit, and to get up to know us a little bit more. Victor is a writer, musician, filmmaker, but I would also call him, he's a consultant, but I would certainly call him a change maker. And we're talking about the situation with fires that have occurred across the country and the ways that Aboriginal people practiced fire stick management. And Victor, I know we often hear, or we even see signs when we're driving around the country, particularly around the July period where I live, is caution, hazard burn off. And can you explain to us, is it a good thing to have these hazard burn offs, or should we be doing it at a much more regular basis?
Well, we're sort of in a position at the moment where we're not managing the land the right way. And this is not a competition between Aboriginal knowledge and Western knowledge. And it certainly isn't about hazard reduction versus traditional burning. What this is about is getting it right, and getting it right for everybody, and for getting the Western mindsets to be more advanced and in tune with looking after the land, just as Aboriginal mindsets were. And that's what this is about. And through that, there's so much for opportunity that comes out of that for Aboriginal people and everyone in the country. But when we look at the hazard reductions, you know, people got to understand what they're burning for and why they're burning. And people just didn't burn to protect their house. You know, they burned to look after the country. And looking after the country is all one fire, from producing food, biodiversity, for producing knowledge and culture and songs and dances and all that cultural nutrition that comes from that. But also it's there to protect the bush from burning from hot fires and wildfires in the late season. So it's all in one. And when we look at just hazard reduction, and from a Western perspective, it's just about getting the fuel loads away. And often when they're burning, it's the wrong fires and it's too hot. And what happens is that they promote the wrong vegetation, which is making things worse down the track for hotter fires. And so they're contributing to worse catastrophic events into the future by managing the land the wrong way through uneducated burns that are not really in tune with the landscape. And so burning to look after country is really crucial. No matter, whenever you're burning, it must be there to look after country. So we're promoting the right grasses and the right vegetation that belongs in those soils and those ecosystems. And that creates a resilience. When our landscape's healthier, we become more resilient to wildfires, and it becomes easier to manage. But we're a long way off that. We need a good decade, 5 years to a decade, of building practitioners and building the skills and continuing to show the benefits on a larger scale, what that is going to look like. Because cultural burning is not a silver bullet in this day and age right now, but in the long term, it is certainly going to be the solution as we gradually get this happening across the country, improve our landscapes, and build the practitioners. Thousands of practitioners that to do this, to do the fires around the country. And I believe that no one should be lighting a fire if they don't know this knowledge that I'm talking about.
And this knowledge that you're talking about, I think one of the big things is when we do sit with our old people, and when you hear Victor talk, actually, for our listeners, I really think you get that sense that the ancestors are walking with him daily and he's hearing that knowledge. But it really is about deep listening to what they're telling us. And they might only tell us elements initially, because we have to learn them before we can move on. Do you think that is happening in the country? I mean, are people listening now to this new, an old way, this lens that of how country appeared to our people?
People are definitely listening, and and that's from Indigenous to non-Indigenous, right across the board, and even across the waters in other countries are listening right now. And it's a big wake-up call when we see Mother Nature screaming at the top of her lungs through these hot fires and through flood events or whatever, and even through the diseases, that like the COVID stuff. And Mother Nature's singing out, and we start to see that lining up with the extinction of plants and animals. It is alarm bells, and we can't continue on the way we're doing. We must do something about it, and I think people are realizing that. And over time, they've also experienced on what's worked and what hasn't worked, and what hasn't worked has always been tried over and over again through the Western ways. But what hasn't been tried and what hasn't been given a shot, in my eyes, are the real solutions. And it's just ludicrous how they're not being put in place, and how we're still talking about this subject, and how these big bushfires that happened last summer, along with the Royal Commission, still haven't come out with tangible solutions that are practical and getting on with the job. We still have fires in Fraser Island, and they're going to do another inquiry on that. I mean, when are they going to just wake up to it? So the people have woken up, but the governments and the management systems are still in the dark ages. And a lot of that is,
there is that resistance, Victor. Why do you think there is a resistance?
Well, there's all sorts of reasons. And, firstly, you've got reasons of people have got a fear, and fear is one big one. Fear of, I'm playing with fire, the fear is going to get away. And then there's a fear that, we don't want Aboriginal people to take over our jobs. And then we get a fear of just that attitude. And that's there as well, of, racism. That's there. You can't rule that out. And it's a mixture of so much. And then there's the legislation and all the bureaucracy and red tape. And then you have all these different mindsets that don't agree with each other. A society that's fragmented. I mean, but at the end of the day, it all boils down to one thing, and that is that people don't know any better. And we can't just take one of those problems and go, well, this is the problem, and pin it on that. It's all the above. And it's the lack of management. And we need to deal with climate change. We need to sort that out. It's all in the same boat of dealing with the same problem. And people are starting to realize that, and slowly. And it's only just so great that for Aboriginal people in Australia, this has been a really important moment in history, really, because, they've finally been listened to. There's communities now all over the country that, actually being listened to and starting to lead their own management. And that's a great thing. You're flat out trying to get that happening in the past. And when we look at the Mole people, like they couldn't exercise their knowledge. Our first fires were illegal fires, and then now it's a whole other story. And, and that's been a credit to all the communities out there that have been doing this work. And it's been a credit to the networks of communities that have been supporting each other. And it's been because of the communities even doing their own work, from the carbon stuff in the northern Australia right through to communities that are doing their own work. And whether we're working together or not, we're all contributing as a collective to the recognition of Indigenous knowledge, and to the solutions into the future, and to getting back on country to look after it. And I think that's something that Aboriginal people should have, because they've taken everything else. Why can't Aboriginal people have the right to look after the land and get that preference to look after the land? And, as a way of economical opportunity, education, and employment, and to really, bring up the well-being and self-sufficiency.
I think you touched on a key word there, and that was collective. And if we look at Australia and the way that we operate with many different nations and diverse landscapes and diverse cultural practices across the country, there is that sense as First Peoples, there is a collective. And I think you're right, we are starting to see a change. We're starting to have a voice, and people are listening to that lens. And it's slowly, but it is about that education. But when we talk about the collective, I think this year, most importantly, we saw the effects of COVID across the world, and particularly across the world with very vulnerable First Nations peoples. We've always had lots of exchanges internationally, which I think a lot of Australians were never aware of, that there was this collective First Nations global movement. And perhaps the Black Lives Matter did touch on recognising First Peoples of country. But you've been working not only in Australia, but I think your filmmaking and the way that you educate and the discussions you have on a global scale. If there was anything that you looked at and what's been happening, can you tell us what is the voice? Is it the same, similar voice of that collective across the world?
Well, yeah, it is a collective across the world, and Indigenous communities come from all over the world. You know, Aboriginal people aren't the only ones.
Just the oldest. Just the oldest.
Yeah, I'm the oldest, but not just Aboriginal people among the oldest, but also the youngest in terms of colonisation. And when we look at other communities that have been 400 years since they've been taken off country, or some 600 to 1,000 years, and we look at Aboriginal people in Finland and other areas around Europe, because there's rock art sites all through that country, all those areas as well, and they're no different to ours. They all have ochre, they're all on rock shelters, they've all been using the same tools. And so Aboriginal people have got a stronger cultural memory in Australia. And the memory of cultural memory, meaning, you know, that culture inside, that knowledge, and, you know, intact. And so that's where Aboriginal Australia has a real opportunity to share with the world, because of that, a lot of that knowledge. And fire has been one of those things. And you can see other things happening now with seed and grain and water management, and it's all, and even education, everything will follow. But at the end of the day, every country around the world is striving for the same thing. Most countries that I know, and we're working with some of those countries in Canada, and, you know, I've had influences in other places as well, and you know, they're striving the same thing, and it's the same problems. And if you close your eyes and listen to the old people in other countries, you think you listen to your own elders. Oh, there's no berries, there's no foods like it was when we were kids, and oh, the young ones aren't listening. You know, it's the same things. And when we look at the environment as well, and other overseas, they're suffering the same problem as our environment. When we look at our social problems, it's the same problem socially. When we look at the problems with the government and the struggles against the government and red tape, it's the same thing. It's all striving the same way. And when I go to other countries, and sometimes, you know, it's like going backwards 20 years. It's like starting 20 years ago in Australia, where people don't even know what culture burning is, and the governments don't want to work with Aboriginal people, and they got to start all over again. But the good thing is that that can be fast-tracked with the successes of other places. And that's what's been good about all the work in Australia, is that it's fast-tracking and helping other communities to fast-track solutions in other places. And, you know, and that's something that Indigenous Australia should be proud of. And you know, our knowledge to be valued across the world will create more opportunity for our mob. And so we've got mobs in Northern Territory going to Africa, you know, as fellas, and sharing their knowledge across that terrain. And I've been going over to Canada, and other people have been going overseas working on education models, health models. I mean, that's the way it should be. And that's that whole rebuilding of humanity, really. And Aboriginal Australia has got the ability to help start that process. And on a global sense, it's really needed right across the world for people to reconnect with their cultures and to reconnect with their landscapes and environments. And I think that's can only improve the knowledge and understanding, and can only bring people closer together when they know that that this is happening in many places. And there's something that's really important, and that is, everyone thinks, oh, it's Aboriginal knowledge, Aboriginal Australian knowledge, and that's an ancient knowledge, and yes, it's true, but there's even something more powerful than that, and that is the knowledge that underpins us all.
I have never actually, I know we've always had these exchanges globally for generations with people talking, whether it was with our nearest neighbours across, the Pacific or Asia. We've definitely had interactions with many groups for thousands, centuries in Australia, but I've never actually thought of us being the youngest, as in that effect of colonisation. And I think a lot of us...
But among the youngest, yeah.
Yeah, I've never really ever thought that way. I've always gone, oh, I'm so proud that we're the oldest living adapting culture. But I think one of the things that we have adapted to is how we do get the knowledge system and get the education out there. And often it's through filmmaking. Now, you make a lot of films, and I think when you do see that through that camera lens and you see country, you can envisage the future. But what's a film that affected you? Can you think of any film, whether it was internationally or nationally, that actually affected you when you were younger, about the state we're in?
I mean, I guess film has been something that's always been a part of my love for theatre and drama and music and the arts. And that's something that I was really wanted to do as a young age, And film has always been something at a young age. You watch movies and, things spin, inspiration goes. But when it came to, for me as as I grew older and my teens and started to get into more into the cultural knowledge side of things in country, film became a really important tool, because that's how we started to record knowledge, and how I started to work with the elders. So the first thing that came to my mind was what you mentioned earlier, was, oh, I hope we don't lose this knowledge, and this is so precious, we can't afford to lose this knowledge. And so it was film that landed in our hands, and it was something that I had a love for. And I had no skills in filmmaking, but I watched enough films to know what it was like, what we're trying to produce. And Indigenous Aboriginal people are natural when it comes to those things too, And so we got a hold of a video camera, and which was just an old Steadicam, old Handycam thing. And we started to point at the old people and go, okay, record that tree and record that knowledge. And what actually happened was that film is a natural sort of thing, and it's the closest thing to the traditional transfer of knowledge. And when I say natural, it's natural because when we close our eyes and we go to sleep and we dream, that's film. That's the images that we see, and that's like we're watching a film in our sleep, or we're watching a film in our mind and our imaginations. And when we see technology capturing that, that allows the elders to speak on country, to be on country, to demonstrate it, and to show the fire, to show where it goes out. The only thing that's missing is the smell and the touch. And so when we look at film, it was the most accurate way to record traditional knowledge, because of it being so close to the traditional transfer of the elders speaking for themselves. And that outweighed writing it down. That outweighed the mistake of misinterpretation, and that was the way that I saw was the best way to record knowledge, and not only for recording knowledge, but also was the best way to educate people. And so we started to do case studies and help. So everywhere I went, with every community, I would take the video camera and then build case studies, just 5 minutes or 3 or 10 minutes long. And there's over 130 films that I've made just on community case studies and fires over the years that are sitting on Vimeo. And all those films have played an amazing role in getting government agencies to understand the intentions, understanding, oh, well, that was what I thought it was going to be. The fires are quite low, and and the people are all relaxed, and there's little babies at the fire and mothers, and I can see what they're intending now. So the film has been a big part of that as well, and I think it's playing also a part in educating classrooms and schools, and I think it'll continue to play a big role as we get education moving, evolving better towards supporting the work that we're doing as well. On all levels.
Reclamation work is so important. It's interesting. Gosh, Victor, I would love to get hold of those films. You need an editor. I can see this. But it's also the music and the song and the story that goes with those knowledge bearers when they're handing down all that information. And as you were talking, I was almost thinking of the film, excuse me, like a song cycle.
Yeah.
It's like people don't, that they hear about song lines, but the actual information and knowledge that is in those song cycles is so important. And I used to always look at song cycles as being like, that was our archive, that was our mapping of country. Mm-hmm. But when I hear you talk so passionately about the film, but also indeed that translation of knowledge, often in the past, there was miscommunication of translation. We just see it with place names around the country as well. Disappointment Bay.
I never really watched, like when you asked me the question about what film inspired me in terms of stuff out there externally that I didn't do. I mean, when I started as soon as I left home and as soon as I was out bush with the elders, I never watched any movies. We didn't watch TV. There was only one channel, and that was ABC. And back then in the bush, and we had no mobile phones. That wasn't around. I didn't get my first mobile phone until 2001. And so when we look at how we were out on country, it was like we never had films, and we never had time for that because we were always out on country and always running around in the bush, and that was what inspired me the most. And even after, when mobile phones and when I started to look at computers and stuff later, even then I still don't look at much movies now, and because we're so busy with the work and being out on country, and that's been the main thing for me. So, but make a lot of films, but don't get to see a lot. And it's just like the book. I haven't got time to read a book, but I wrote one. I've never read a book. But then you write a book, you don't even realize that these things happen in your life. But yeah, I mean, but it's all important. And, I think, I'd like to make more films and bigger films. And I'm sort of got an ambition to do that as well, with more writing that I'm trying to do.
Well, if we take your note, and in 5 years, right across the country, we've instigated proper fire methods and the Fire Stick Alliance grows, then you will have time to do your films, Victor, and you will have time to sit down and just enjoy country as well. Look, it's been so wonderful. You've given so much of your time. And of course, for our listeners, Victor Steffensen, extraordinary individual, is a change maker. And I would also add another word to that now, is a protector of country and a caretaker. And if you want to learn more about that stewardship, about fires and country, then of course you can visit our website, welcometocountry.com, and Victor's book is available online. Victor, just wonderful talking to you, brother. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone out there.
And then we'll listen to your music later.
Yeah, I'll have a track coming soon.
Great. Thank you again, Victor, so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Welcome to Country acknowledges our First Peoples, the custodians who continue their stewardship across our vast lands. We invite you to be our guests and make a true connection. Welcome to Country is a non-profit organisation. It's at the helm of an Aboriginal man and it's run by Aboriginal staff.
All Australians should be passionate about our own country, and Aboriginal culture is a key part of that.
We are the original storytellers, and if everyone understands that message, I think that we'll have a far better future for all of Australia.
It's about learning and connecting.
As we know, it's the oldest living culture in the world.
Simply is the premier site to find amazing experiences and great products around Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australia.
Got to have a great website. So what was needed was to have a common platform that could do the marketing, the sales, all those things that small businesses, whether they're Indigenous or not, struggle over. So people can focus on the thing they're passionate about and deliver that business.
It's about creating employment and economic opportunities for the community. That's the number one thing.
The best thing is by purchasing from us, they are directly giving back and supporting Indigenous communities, artists and their families.
The key is to enable them to stay on their country or in their city and be able to give them a platform to really flourish and create self-sufficiency.
It is basically self-determination and learning about country through the narrative of our lens.
We're not doing this because we want to put money into our pockets, but rather we want to see community benefit from what we're doing.
We want to be able to show that we're in control and managing our stories. We want to be able to share those stories, and we want to be able to create our own jobs and create our own economies.
For me and my wife's business, we've got the daughters all working. When we started, we had the brothers involved, we had the aunties involved, we had the uncles involved. Yeah, so we show them what Paraka look like and get them to throw a spear also as well.
We're rich in culture and history, and I said we need to share that because that's where we're going to get changes.
It's a great initiative, really connecting with Indigenous tourism, grassroots people, teaching culture and educating people.
This is a form of livelihood, it's independence, it's self-esteem, and it brings pride.
Now that I'm here working for Dreamtime for the last 2 years, I've actually became a Master Reef Guide.
Some of us are really reaping the benefits of that in terms of employment, self-empowerment, self-sustainability, economic development in our communities.
It is really time that this country started to embrace the importance, the knowledge, the power and the beauty of Aboriginal culture.
I have always wanted for non-Indigenous people in this country to actually experience, meet and connect with Aboriginal people.
When you visit a destination, you hear that local story, you feel the seasons, you witness the passion that people have on the land that has been there since time immemorial. There's nothing quite like it.
Anytime any Australian's looking for an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander cultural experience, the first thing they'll think of is welcometocountry.com.
To continue your journey and make a true connection right across Australia, visit us at welcometocountry.com.